Tashidile. Welcome to Tibet This Week. Today is the last day of the Ayin Rat year in Tibetan lunar calendar.
In this episode of Tibet This Week, we bring to you the top 10 news of the year.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama continues to guide the world during pandemic.
World leaders wish His Holiness the Dalai Lama on 85th birthday.
Central Tibetan administration celebrates Year of Gratitude to His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
Human rights in Tibet continues to be grim.
CTA tackles COVID-19 challenges.
Tibetan Parliament in Exile convenes one-day budget session, postpones 10th session to March.
US passes Tibetan Policy and Support Act 2020 into law.
Exiled Tibetans hold 2021 general election.
Tibetan students excel in academics.
International community continues to monitor situation in Tibet.
As the world struggles to battle with the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, His Holiness the Dalai Lama brought positivity and encouragement to all of us through several teachings and by actively engaging in many seminars and conferences virtually throughout the year. His Holiness the Dalai Lama was seen communicating with religious leaders, students, global leaders, academicians, scientists and climate activists on different topics in around 40 different occasions. His Holiness the Dalai Lama also launched the book Science and Philosophy in the Indian Buddhist Classics, Volume 2, The Mind.
As His Holiness the Great 14th Dalai Lama turned 85 on 6th July, warm wishes and greetings poured in from prominent personalities and netizens across the globe. Marking a global celebration of His Holiness's life and legacy, His Holiness received a special video with greetings from 85 prominent personalities around the world, including former US President George W. Bush, Speaker of the US House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi, Minister of State of the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports Kiran Rijiju, and BJP National General Secretary Ram Madhav, etc.
In honor of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's 85th birthday, Tibetans and Tibet supporters around the world dedicated the year as the Year of Gratitude to His Holiness the Dalai Lama in recognition to his outstanding contribution to humanity. A week-long virtual series on the 4 principal commitments of His Holiness the Dalai Lama saw around 120 speakers speaking in 15 different languages on His Holiness's 4 principal commitments. CTA organized and hosted many events to observe the year, including mass distribution drive across India during the pandemic, essay and drawing competition among the Tibetan students, and virtual panel discussions with scholars and researchers.
There have been reports of Chinese authorities arresting and detaining 16 Tibetans. In August, 2 Tibetan nomads, Dogyab, aged 63, and his relative Galsen, aged 43, from Chiktil village in Chumar County, in eastern Tibet, were reportedly arrested for their resistance to confiscations of ownership of their land.
A 36-year-old Tibetan woman and a mother of 3 named Lama, who was from Dhiru County in Nakchu, Tibet, died of police torture in August 2020. Lama was reportedly detained in June by the Chinese authorities for sending money to family members or other Tibetans in India.
2 Tibetans named Kako and Namyak were reportedly arrested for sharing information regarding exiled Tibetan general election.
Another Tibetan woman named Tsiring Tso was placed in 10 days of administrative detention in Theka County, Henan Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture in Qinghai Province for expressing her thoughts on the popular Chinese social media app WeChat. She was detained under unspecified other provocative acts category as the legal basis for her detention.
Kendul Hundrup, a 46-year-old monk and a popular Tibetan writer and a poet, was arrested on 2nd December in Repkong County in Malo, northeastern Tibet. His current whereabouts are unknown.
San Francisco-based prisoners' right advocacy group Duihua has reported 9 Tibetans convicted of inciting splitism by the Kharzi Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture Intermediate People's Court in Sichuan. The 9 Tibetans were Chetar, Dolma Tsiring, Thakpa, Tsiring Yeshi, Pempa, Namkha Gyalsen, Pema Tsetar, Putuk and Pudar. Many of the charges made against these Tibetans were not clear and unspecified.
There have been 14 known cases where Tibetans were sentenced to varying prison terms. In June 2020, Tibetv, a 36-year-old popular Tibetan singer from Kamtiru in Nakchu, Tibet, has been sentenced by Chinese authorities to 6 years in prison for singing a song criticizing China's repressive policies in Tibet. He was sentenced on charges of separatist activities. Within 2 months after the release of his song Black Hat, Tibetv held under arbitrary detention in May 2019 for more than a year, during which he was subjected to beatings and harsh interrogations.
Chinese court in Sangchu County, People's Court in Gangsu Province, Khanlo, Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture, sentenced 10 Tibetans in the month of June with prison terms varying from 9 to 14 years. They were charged for extortion and forced trading. The 10 Tibetans were identified as Tashi Gyatso, Ningchak, Gyalo, Sunam Gyal, Takthar Gyal, Tsewang, Tempa Gyatso, Tamding Dorji, Tamding Tsiring, and Chopa Tsiring.
Golok Prefecture Intermediate Court sentenced a Tibetan nomad Hlundrup Dorji from Machin, Golok Prefecture in Tibet to a 1-year prison term on charges of inciting separatism for forwarding and posting contents that China considers illegal, including pictures and teachings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama on his Weibo and WeChat accounts. Hlundrup Dorji was arrested on July 23rd and was held in detention for 5 months until his sentencing.
2 Tibetans named Khanto Tseten and Tsego from Tseko County, Malho, Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture in Xinghai Province were reported to have sentenced to 7 years and 3 years in prison respectively by the Chinese court in northeastern Tibet in July 2020. They were sentenced under the charges of state subversion and leaking state secrets after they composed, sang and circulated a song in praise of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Rights group claim all these Tibetans were sentenced on false charges by the Chinese authorities.
There have been 6 known deaths of Tibetan political prisoners whose deaths are directly linked to torture and other ill treatments they suffered during their imprisonment, leading to serious health complications at the time of their release. A Tibetan woman and a mother of 3 named Lama from Tibet's Diru County in Nakchu died of police torture shortly after she was sent to a local hospital from police custody in August 2020. Within 2 months of Lama's arrest, her family members were summoned by the authorities to a police hospital where Lama was reportedly bruised severely that she was unrecognizable to her family members and was unable to speak to them. She passed away in the hospital 2 days later.
A former Tibetan political prisoner named Chuki, who was released in year 2019 after serving his 4-year sentence term in Chinese prison, died in May 2020 due to torture suffered in prison. He died at his home in Shosang village, Nyuto Township, Shethar County in Kharzai Tibetan Autonomous Prefecture, Sichuan Province.
Tile Chödön, also known as Samdup, passed away in February 2020. He was imprisoned for 7 years after protesting against Chinese authorities.
A Tibetan monk named Tashi Phuntsok, an aide to the late Tulku Tenzing Delek Rinpoche, passed away in March this year after prolonged illness and imprisonment. His health had been reportedly poor ever since his release from Yarkaphuk prison near Darsedo, incorporated into Sichuan Province in July 2003. At the time of Venerable Tashi Phuntsok's arrest, he was reportedly suffering from tuberculosis. Owing to lack of proper medical care and ill treatment in prison, his health deteriorated while he was serving his 7-year imprisonment.
A former political prisoner named Gendu Sherap passed away in the month of April due to injuries sustained in prison. He was monk of Rongpo Rapte Monastery in Sok County, Nakchu Prefecture in the so-called Tibet Autonomous Region, who was arrested in 2017 on charge of sharing and disseminating politically sensitive documents on Chinese social media platforms.
Tsiring Bhagdo also passed away on 26 April at his native aged 51. He served 8 years in prison for protesting against the illegal Chinese rule in Tibet by raising Tibetan flag and calling for return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama.
A 19-year-old Tibetan monk, Tenzin Nyima from Zawembo, died on 19 January 2021 after being severely beaten and tortured by the Chinese authorities for peaceful independence protests in November 2019.
One of the clear instances of China's strong control over information flow in and out of Tibet is the case of recent surfacing of report of Shermo, who passed away following self-immolation in 2015. Even the condition of Tibetan language rights advocate Tashi Wangchuk after his reported release in January 2021 is unknown.
As the first case of COVID-19 surfaced from the Wuhan city of China, the countries of the world were seen battling with the challenges of the pandemic. The Central Tibetan Administration initiated several measures in its effort to tackle the spread of the pandemic in Tibetan community in exile. The Cabinet Kashak approved Rs 3.3 crore for COVID-19 program benefiting Tibetan communities, especially the elders, distressed, and the students stranded in their colleges. This was the first large support package approved by the CTA.
A COVID task force led by Si Kyong and the Kaling of Department of Health was set up to handle COVID cases.
CTA has observed extended lockdown to contain the spread of the virus even after the nationwide lockdown in India was lifted.
CTA provided multiple facilities like ambulance services and quarantine facilities, helpline number for emotional and psychological support, telecounseling service for coping with mental stress, etc.
Swab sample collection was set up in major Tibetan settlements.
CTA distributed monetary support for students stranded in colleges, elders and distressed Tibetans from the Emergency Relief Fund.
Students were provided with online classes and other learning resources through platforms such as Tibettv.
CTA organized series of prayer services for those who have lost their lives and that of their family members to COVID-19 and for the speedy recovery of the ones still fighting the battle.
According to the 45th COVID-19 briefing, 196 Tibetan healthcare workers in India were vaccinated under the first phase of Pan-India immunization drive initiated on 16th January.
A total of 1,519 COVID-positive cases were reported in exiled Tibetan community, out of which there were 1,449 cases of recovery and 41 deaths. There are 29 active cases currently as per the 45th COVID-19 briefing.
In the light of COVID-19 outbreak across the world, with an increasing number of confirmed cases of positive patients in India, the budget session of the 16th Tibetan Parliament in exile for the fiscal year 2020 to 2021, scheduled to hold for 10 days, was convened for only one day as a measure to contain the spread of the virus. Strictly following the set agendas, the one-day session of the Tibetan Parliament in exile passed and approved the budget of all the departments of the CTA for the year 2020 to 2021. Following the same reason, the 10th session of the 16th Tibetan Parliament in exile was postponed to March 2021.
In a historical milestone achieved, the United States passed Tibetan Policy and Support Act 2020 into law. Built on the historic Tibet Policy Act of 2002, the bipartisan-supported Tibetan Policy and Support Act of 2020 reaffirms the rights of Tibetans to choose a successor to their spiritual leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, sending a clear message that Chinese officials who interfere in the succession or reincarnation process will be subjected to targeted financial, economic, visa-related sanctions, including those contained in the Global Magnitsky Act. The law also formally recognizes the CTA as the legitimate representative of the Tibetan people and the Si Kyong as its president.
Despite the ensuing challenges of the coronavirus pandemic, the preliminary round of the 2021 Tibetan general election for Si Kyong of the 16th Kashak and members of the 17th Tibetan Parliament reflected an extraordinary level of participation, most notably among the younger generation of Tibetans. The Tibetan exile community came out in droves to vote for their next Si Kyong and members of 17th Tibetan Parliament in the preliminary election of 2021 held on the 3rd of January 2021. This year's general election for Si Kyong and members of the Tibetan Parliament in exile is the third direct election of the Tibetan leadership since the complete devolution of political authority by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 2011.
This year has seen some extraordinary academic performances amongst the Tibetan students in India. For the first time, two Tibetan students, Tenzing Yeshi and Kunga Lekjung, made headlines by scoring more than 500 in the All India National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test.
As the Central Board of Secondary Education declared the results of Class 10 and 12 board examination, 19 Tibetan students in each of the grades scored 95% and above, making it the first time ever in the Tibetan children's history of academic achievements.
From many of those academic achievements, Tibetan student Tashi Lamo bagged gold medal in master's degree in Library and Information Science for the highest academic rank in Mangalore University.
Similarly, two Tibetan students, Tenzin Chenzom and Sunam Chigi, who graduated in Bachelors of Business Administration and Bachelors in Commerce respectively, were awarded the gold medal for the highest academic ranks in the Dayanand Sagar University, Bengaluru.
82 organizations and associations, predominantly from Central and Eastern Europe, have submitted a joint petition for the cancellation of appointment of Chang Don, Minister at the Permanent Mission of the People's Republic of China, to the Human Rights Council's consultative group. The petition also noted that China's appointment to the influential group sends a discouraging message to all the Tibetans who have been raising their voices against the oppressive Chinese regime in their more than 6 decades of struggle and who continue to pin their hopes on the UN.
In a biting criticism of China's continued restriction over access to Tibet, the US State Department in July 2020 announced visa restriction on PRC government and Chinese Communist Party officials under the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act of 2018.
In their 2020 annual report, the Congressional Executive Commission on China highlighted their concerns on the Chinese Communist Party's increasingly repressive tactics such as intimidation of critics, censorship of internet, academia, journalism, and interference in foreign governments and citizens.
The United States State Department's Office of Policy Planning released a 72-page report titled The Elements of the China Challenge. The report mentioned Tibet as a military-occupied land.
That was the top 10 news of the year.
We at Tibettv wishes all its viewers who are celebrating Tibetan Losar a very happy and a prosperous Losar. Tashdile.